The sun was just coming up over London. The sky turned from dark blue to light pink and orange. It was going to be a beautiful day. People were already lined up outside Westminster Abbey. Some had been there all night, sleeping in small tents or sitting in chairs wrapped in blankets. They wanted the best spots to see the royal family. An old woman named Martha had come from a small town 3 hours away. She sat on a fold-up chair, a thermos of hot tea by her side. "I've seen 3 kings and 2 queens in my lifetime," she told the young couple next to her. "But today feels special. The whole family together after the king was so sick." The young couple nodded. They had brought their 7-year-old daughter, Emma, who was bouncing up and down with excitement. She held a small flag and a bunch of flowers she hoped to give to one of the princesses. Police officers walked up and down the growing line. They checked their watches and spoke into their radios. More and more people came as the morning went on. Soon the streets were full. News vans parked nearby, and reporters with cameras and microphones stood ready. Inside Westminster Abbey, everything was busy. Workers placed the last flowers in big vases. The flowers were white and blue, the Queen's favorite colors. The sun came through the big stained glass windows, making colorful patterns on the stone floor. Mrs. Wilson, who had worked at the Abbey for 30 years, checked every seat one last time. "Everything must be perfect," she said to her team. "This is the first time we'll see the king looking well again." Outside, food trucks opened up to serve the waiting people. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air. A group of school children arrived, all wearing matching blue uniforms. Their teacher reminded them to be on their best behavior. "Will we really see the little prince?" one child asked. "Yes," the teacher said with a smile. "And his sisters too." As the clock on the big tower struck 9, the crowd grew more excited. The ceremony would start at 11, but the royal family would begin arriving at 10. People took out their phones, ready to take pictures. A group of soldiers marched into place. Their red uniforms and tall black hats stood out in the crowd. They lined up along the path where the royal cars would stop. A man with a big drum practiced a few beats. The sound echoed off the old buildings. Sarah, a flower girl chosen from a local school, practiced her curtsy one more time. Her mother fixed the ribbon in her hair. "Remember to look at the Queen when you give her the flowers," she said, "and speak clearly." Inside the Abbey, the choir boys and girls warmed up their voices. Their clear, high singing filled the huge space. The organist played soft music, testing that everything sounded right. The royal staff arrived, carrying folders and speaking quietly into phones. They checked every detail. A red carpet was rolled out from the Abbey door to where the cars would stop. Back in the crowd, a man lifted his little boy onto his shoulders. "That's where kings and queens have been crowned for almost 1,000 years, he told his son. "Will we see a crown today?" the boy asked. "No," his father said. "Today is not about crowns. It's about family." The crowd suddenly turned as the first motorcycle police appeared in the distance. Blue lights flashed. People stood taller and held up their phones. "They're coming," someone shouted. Everyone fell silent as the first black car with royal flags turned the corner. Inside, they could see the shapes of people. The royal family was about to make their grand entrance. This day, which people would talk about for years to come, was finally beginning. The first car stopped at the edge of the red carpet. Everyone held their breath. The door opened slowly. A man in a dark suit stepped out first. He looked around and then nodded. He was part of the security team. Then came the real moment everyone was waiting for. Prince James, the king's youngest son, stepped out with his wife, Princess Amelia. The crowd cheered loudly. Princess Amelia wore a light green dress with a small matching hat. She smiled and waved at the people. Prince James, in his navy uniform with gold buttons, stood tall beside her. They had been married just last year, and people still loved to see them together. "Look at her dress," a woman in the crowd said. "So beautiful." Behind them came their 2 children. 10-year-old Lady Rose wore a dress that matched her mother's. She walked carefully, trying to look grown up. Her younger brother, 7-year-old Lord Henry, looked nervous. He held his mother's hand tightly and gave shy waves to the crowd. The family walked slowly up the red carpet. Princess Amelia stopped to talk to Sarah, the flower girl. The little girl did a perfect curtsy and gave the princess a small bunch of flowers. Princess Amelia bent down to thank her, and the cameras flashed like crazy. "She's so kind," Martha said from her spot in the crowd. "Always takes time for the children." The second car pulled up. Out stepped the king's sister, Princess Eleanor, with her husband and their 3 teenage children. Princess Eleanor was known for her charity work and serious nature. Today she wore a dark blue outfit and walked with quick, confident steps. Her children followed, the oldest son helping his younger sisters with their hats in the light breeze. Princess Eleanor looks just like her mother did at that age. An old man in the crowd told his grandson, "I remember seeing the old queen when I was your age." More cars arrived. Cousins, aunts, and uncles of the king all made their way into the abbey. Each arrival made the crowd cheer again. People pointed out their favorite royals to each other. Inside the abbey, the first family members took their seats. The huge space was filling up with important people from all over the country. Politicians sat near the front. Famous actors and singers were there too. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes. The choir began to sing softly as people found their places. The sound filled the abbey like gentle waves. The sunlight coming through the windows seemed to make everything glow. Outside, the crowd grew even more excited as the next car arrived. This one was bigger and had special flags on the front. It was the king's brother, Prince Thomas, who was next in line to be king after the king's own children. Prince Thomas stepped out with his wife and their 4 children. He was tall like his brother, with the same strong features, but he smiled more easily and often joked with the public. Today he looked serious, knowing all eyes were on him. His oldest son, Prince Oliver, was now 16 and already as tall as his father. The young prince waved to the crowd, and teenage girls screamed and took pictures. His 3 younger sisters giggled at the attention their brother was getting. "One day he'll be king too," Emma's father told her as they watched from the crowd. After his uncle and cousin, the abbey bells began to ring louder now. The sound echoed across London. This meant the most important cars would arrive soon. The king and queen were coming. Everyone stood taller. Phones and cameras were held up high. Security men walked up and down, checking everything one last time. The soldiers stood straighter, their faces serious. The biggest moment of the day was about to happen. In just minutes, the king and queen would arrive at Westminster Abbey. A special feeling filled the air as everyone waited for the king and queen. The crowd grew quiet. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Then, in the distance, people saw motorcycle police with blue lights flashing. "They're coming," someone shouted. People pushed forward gently, trying to get a better view. The royal car was bigger than the others. It was black and shiny with gold decorations on the sides. Special flags flew on the front. The car moved slowly toward the abbey. Inside, people could see shapes moving. The car stopped. Everyone held their breath. The door opened, and the king's guard stepped out first. He wore a bright red uniform with many medals. He stood tall and looked around, then nodded. Then the king stepped out. The crowd cheered so loudly that the sound seemed to shake the ground. The king wore his full military uniform. Unlike the last time people had seen him, he looked strong and healthy. His illness had made him lose weight, but now he stood straight and tall. He smiled and waved at the people. A small girl in the crowd started crying with happiness. "I told you he was better," she said to her mother. The queen stepped out next. She wore a beautiful blue dress and matching hat with small white flowers. Her smile was warm as she waved to the crowd. In her hand, she carried a small purse that matched her outfit perfectly. "Look at her jewelry," Martha said to the young couple next to her. The queen wore a necklace with blue stones that caught the sunlight and sparkled. It had belonged to the king's mother and grandmother before her. The king offered his arm to the queen, and they began to walk together down the red carpet. They moved slowly, stopping often to greet people. The king bent down to speak to a small boy in a wheelchair. The queen accepted flowers from an old woman who had tears in her eyes. "My great-grandmother gave flowers to your great-grandmother," the old woman said. The queen took her hand and held it for a moment. Inside the abbey, everyone stood as the doors opened. The organ played loud, grand music. The king and queen walked down the long aisle between the rows of seats. They nodded to people on both sides. Important people bowed their heads as the royal couple passed. All the other royal family members were already inside. They stood as the king and queen approached. The youngest children had been told many times how to behave, but still, the king's youngest grandson couldn't help waving excitedly when he saw his grandfather. The king smiled back at the boy. It was a warm, real smile, not just the official one he used for public events. People who saw it felt a lump in their throats. After his long illness, seeing the king connect with his grandson meant so much. The royal couple took their seats at the front. The abbey was now full. The music grew softer, and the head of the church stood up to speak. "Welcome to Westminster Abbey," he said in a voice that carried to every corner of the big space. "Today we gather as a family, the royal family and the family of our nation." The king looked around at his family members seated nearby. His children, grandchildren, siblings, cousins, all dressed in their best clothes, all there to support him. After the fear and worry of his illness, this moment felt especially precious. The queen reached over and took his hand. It was not something they usually did in public, but today was different. Today was about family. The king squeezed her hand gently, and she smiled at him. The ceremony was about to begin. But for many people watching, the most touching part had already happened, seeing the royal family together, strong and united, showing their love for each other, just like any other family would. The ceremony began with music. The choir sang a song that had been sung in the abbey for hundreds of years. Their voices rose up to the high ceiling and seemed to make the whole building shake with sound. The king closed his eyes for a moment, taking it all in. The head of the church spoke about the abbey's history. He told how kings and queens had been crowned there for nearly 1,000 years, how royal weddings and funerals had taken place under the same roof. The abbey was like a living history book of the royal family. And today, he said, we celebrate not just this building, but the strength of family bonds that have kept our nation's heart beating through good times and hard times. The king nodded. He knew about hard times. His illness had been kept quiet at first, but when people found out, the whole country had worried. Letters and cards had poured into the palace, thousands of them. Children had made drawings of the king getting better. Now, sitting here healthy again, he felt grateful. In the third row, the king's youngest granddaughter whispered something to her mother. Princess Amelia smiled but put a finger to her lips. The little girl tried to sit still, but it was hard. She was only 6 years old, and the ceremony seemed very long. The choir began another song. This time, a young boy with a clear, high voice sang alone at first. His voice was so pure that it brought tears to many eyes. Even the queen dabbed at her eyes with a small handkerchief. Outside, the crowd still waited. Big screens had been set up so people could watch what was happening inside. When the camera showed the king, people cheered. "He looks so much better," a man said to his wife. "Remember how thin and pale he was at Christmas." Back inside, it was time for the king to speak. He stood up slowly and walked to the special stand. Papers with his speech lay there, but he looked out at the people instead of reading right away. "My family," he began, "both the family seated here in the front rows, and my larger family, the people of this nation." His voice was strong and clear, not weak like it had been during his illness. He spoke about the abbey, about its stones that had seen so much history, but then he said something that wasn't in the written speech. When I was ill, the king said, I thought a lot about what matters most. It is not crowns or castles or ceremonies. It is the love we share with each other, the support we give in dark times. The queen looked at him with surprise. This was not in the planned speech. The king continued, looking at my family today, my children, my grandchildren, my brother and sister, I feel like the richest man in the world. And looking out at all of you who sent your good wishes during my illness, I know our country's heart is strong. Many people in the abbey were crying now. Even some of the guards, who were trained never to show emotion, had tears in their eyes. The king's youngest grandson, who was only 5, didn't really understand the speech. But he knew his grandfather had been very sick and now was better. When the king finished speaking and sat down again, the little boy couldn't help himself. "Grandpa," he called out. The sound of his small voice echoed in the quiet abbey. People gasped. Royal children were taught never to speak out during official events. For a moment, everything froze. The boy's mother looked embarrassed. But then the king did something surprising. He smiled at his grandson and winked, just a quick wink that said, "It's okay." The tension broke. People smiled, and some even laughed softly. In that moment, the king wasn't just a king. He was a grandfather who loved his grandson. And somehow, that made him seem even more special to everyone watching. After the king's speech, the ceremony continued. A famous singer stood up next. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry except small pearl earrings. The abbey became very quiet as she began to sing. Her voice was like nothing most people had ever heard before. It filled every corner of the huge space. The song was an old one about love and family. The queen had specially asked for it. As the singer hit the highest notes, people felt chills run down their spines. The king reached for the queen's hand again. They had been married for 35 years. The song reminded them of their wedding day in this same abbey. Princess Eleanor's teenage daughter wiped away tears during the song. Her mother noticed and put an arm around her shoulders. The girl leaned into her mother. Though they were royal, they were still just a mother and daughter sharing a moment. When the song ended, no one moved for a few seconds. It was as if everyone needed time to return to the real world. Then the abbey filled with soft clapping. Next came a part of the ceremony that no one expected. The head of the church asked the king's family to come forward. The king looked surprised. This was not in the program. One by one, his children and their families stood and walked to the front. Today we celebrate not just history, but the future, the church leader said. The future of this family that has served our nation for so long. The king's grandchildren lined up in front of him. There were 8 of them now, ranging from 16 years old down to 3. They stood in order of age. Each child held a single white rose. The oldest, Prince Oliver, stepped forward first. He bowed to his grandfather and handed him the rose. With love and respect, he said in a clear voice. One by one, each grandchild did the same. The smallest girl, just 3 years old, forgot what to say when her turn came. She looked around, suddenly scared by all the people watching her. The king leaned down from his chair. "It's okay," he said softly. "Just give Grandpa the flower." The little girl's face broke into a smile. She handed him the rose and then, forgetting all the rules, threw her arms around his neck for a hug. A collective awe went through the abbey. The queen dabbed at her eyes again. The king hugged his granddaughter back before her mother gently led her away. He now held 8 white roses. The head of the church brought a special vase that had been hidden until now. It was made of crystal and gold, with the family crest carved into it. "These flowers represent the future branches of your family tree," the church leader said. "May they grow strong and true." The king placed the roses in the vase. The sunlight hitting the crystal sent little rainbows dancing across the floor of the abbey. Outside, the crowd watched on the screens. They cheered at the sweet moment with the youngest princess. An old man in the crowd was crying openly. "I've watched this family all my life," he told people near him. Seen their weddings, their christenings, their funerals. But I've never seen anything quite like this. Back inside, the grandchildren returned to their seats. The king stood to thank the church leader for the surprise. As he did, the sunlight coming through the stained glass windows hit him directly. For a moment, he seemed to glow with red, blue, and gold light. Many people later said it felt like a sign, a blessing of some kind. The king himself paused and looked up at the windows, feeling the warm light on his face. After months of being ill, mostly indoors and away from the public, the sunlight felt like life itself touching him. The queen watched her husband with love in her eyes. The worst was behind them now. Her family was together and strong. Whatever came next, they would face it together, just as they had faced the king's illness. The ceremony moved into its next part. The head of the church asked everyone to stand. Together, all the people in the abbey sang a song that everyone in the country knew. Even the smallest children in the royal family joined in, their small voices adding to the hundreds of others. Outside, the crowd sang too. The sound carried across the city. People driving in cars heard it and stopped to listen. In homes across the country, families watching on TV stood up in their living rooms and sang along. When the song ended, the king stepped forward again. This time, he carried a special box made of dark wood with gold designs on it. The box had been in the royal family for 200 years. Inside this box, the king said, is a piece of stone from the very first abbey built on this ground over 1,000 years ago. Today, I am adding something new. He opened the box carefully. Everyone leaned forward to see better. Inside was indeed a small, rough piece of gray stone. Next to it, the king placed a tiny silver heart. It shone brightly against the dark wood of the box. This heart, the king explained, is made from coins collected by schoolchildren across our country during my illness. They sent these coins with their get-well wishes. Now they have been melted down and made into this heart, a reminder that the love between a country and its royal family works both ways. People in the abbey clapped, and some called out, "Hear, hear." The king's brother, Prince Thomas, nodded with approval. It had been his idea to collect the coins, though he had not known what his brother planned to do with them. The queen looked at her husband with pride. During his illness, there had been times when she feared he might not recover. Doctors had worked day and night to help him. Now here he stood, strong again, thinking not of himself but of ways to thank the people for their support. The box was passed around for the royal family to see. Each person touched it gently as it went by. When it came to the 5-year-old prince, the one who had called out earlier, he looked at it with big eyes. "Can I put something in too?" he asked in a loud whisper that everyone could hear. The adults looked at each other, not sure what to do. This wasn't planned. But the king nodded to his grandson. "What would you like to add?" he asked. The little boy reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small toy soldier. It was painted red and blue and had been with him all day. "This is my brave man," the boy said. "I want him to stay with the heart to keep it safe." There was a moment of silence, then soft laughter and sounds of awe around the abbey. The king looked at the toy soldier, then at his grandson's serious face. Without hesitation, he placed the toy in the box next to the silver heart. "A perfect guardian," the king said. "Thank you." The little boy smiled with pride. His mother looked like she didn't know whether to be embarrassed or touched. The queen solved the problem by putting an arm around both of them. The church leader cleared his throat, clearly trying to get the ceremony back on track. But everyone could see he was fighting a smile too. "Sometimes," he said, "the most meaningful traditions are the new ones we create together." The box was carefully closed and carried to a special table near the altar. It would stay in the abbey for a week for people to see, then go back to the palace and join other royal treasures. As the ceremony continued, the toy soldier became the thing everyone talked about. News reporters outside were already sharing the story. By evening, it would be in headlines around the world. The brave man and the silver heart, One newspaper would call it, "The simple gesture of a child had become the most memorable moment of the day." After the touching moment with the toy soldier, the ceremony moved to its next part. This was when special awards would be given to people who had helped the country. The king stood again, this time with a box of medals. "These people," the king said, "have shown great courage, kindness, and service to others." One by one, 5 people came forward. The first was a young woman who had saved 3 children from a burning house. She walked slowly, still healing from her burns. The king placed a medal around her neck and spoke quietly to her. Those sitting close by could see tears in her eyes as she walked back to her seat. Next came an old man who had started food banks across the country. He had fed thousands of hungry people. The king shook his hand for a long time and thanked him for his work. The third person was a surprise to many people watching. It was the king's main doctor, the one who had helped him through his illness. The doctor looked shocked when his name was called. He had not known this would happen. "This man," the king said in a loud voice, "did not just save one life. By saving me, he allowed me to continue serving all of you." The doctor bowed his head as the king put the medal on him. The queen wiped away a tear. She knew better than anyone how close the king had come to dying during his worst days. The fourth person was a young boy, only 12 years old. He had raised millions for sick children by walking across the country. Though he was not royal, he held himself like a prince as he accepted his medal. The last person made everyone in the abbey gasp. It was Martha, the old woman who had waited outside since early morning. Royal guards had found her in the crowd and brought her inside just minutes before. "This woman," the king explained, "has attended every royal event for 70 years. She has shown a lifetime of loyalty and love for our family." Martha's hands shook as the king placed the medal around her neck. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she whispered. "My mother would be so proud." As Martha returned to her seat, the young couple who had been next to her outside watched on the screens with their mouths open. "That's Martha," they kept saying. "That's Martha from this morning." Inside the abbey, the ceremony was nearing its end. The choir sang one more song, softer this time. The king and queen sat together, holding hands again. They looked at their family around them. Children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, cousins, all together on this special day. The head of the church said final words of blessing. He asked for good health for the royal family, especially the king. He asked for wisdom as they served the country, and he asked for love to keep them strong as a family. As the final amen echoed through the abbey, the king stood up. This wasn't in the program, but no one tried to stop him. He turned to face not the altar, but his family. "Thank you," he said simply. The microphones were off now, so only those nearby could hear him. "Thank you for standing by me through the darkest days. I love you all." Princess Amelia, his daughter-in-law, began to clap. Soon, everyone was clapping, not just for the king, but for all of them as a family. The sound grew until it filled the abbey completely. Outside, people heard the clapping and joined in, even though they didn't know exactly why. The sound spread through the crowd like a wave. Inside, the king's youngest granddaughter slipped out of her seat and ran to him. She grabbed his hand. Then another grandchild joined, and another. Soon all 8 grandchildren surrounded the king and queen. Press photographers captured the moment. The king and queen in the middle of a circle of children. It wasn't planned. It wasn't proper royal behavior, but it was real and full of love. That photo would soon be on front pages around the world. People would frame it and put it in their homes. It showed that even royal families are still families at heart. It was time for the royal family to leave the abbey. The organ began to play again, and everyone stood up. The king and queen would go out first, then the rest of the family would follow in order. The king offered his arm to the queen, and they walked slowly down the long center aisle. People bowed their heads as they passed. The queen smiled at people she knew. Her blue dress seemed to float as she walked. Behind them came Prince Thomas and his wife. then Princess Eleanor and her husband. The rest of the family followed in pairs. Last came the children, with the older ones helping the younger ones remember how to walk properly. Prince Oliver, the 16-year-old, held his little cousin's hand. The 3-year-old princess who had hugged the king earlier was trying her best to walk like a grown-up. Her small face was serious with concentration. Outside, the crowd had grown even bigger. When the abbey doors opened and the king and queen appeared, people cheered and waved flags. The sound was so loud that some of the younger children covered their ears. The king paused at the top of the steps. He looked out at the thousands of people who had waited all day to see him. He raised his hand and waved. The crowd cheered even louder. Camera flashes went off everywhere. News teams from around the world pointed their cameras at the royal family. This was the image everyone had been waiting for. The king, healthy and strong again, with his family around him. Suddenly, someone in the crowd released white doves. 20 beautiful birds flew up into the blue sky. The royal children pointed and gasped. It was a surprise that no one had planned. "Look, Grandpa," the 5-year-old prince called out. He forgot to use the proper "Your Majesty" in his excitement. The king laughed. "Yes, I see them," he said. "Aren't they beautiful?" The queen watched the birds with a smile. "A perfect ending," she said quietly to her husband. The royal family made their way down the steps. At the bottom, a line of children from local schools waited with flowers. Each child gave a small bunch of flowers to one of the royals. Even the smallest children in the royal family received flowers, which made them smile shyly. Sarah, the flower girl from earlier, had a special job now. She carried a small pillow with the queen's gloves that had been removed during the ceremony. She walked carefully next to the queen, holding the pillow out with great pride. The news cameras caught this sweet moment. The queen bending down to thank Sarah, and Sarah doing a perfect curtsy in return. The cars were waiting, but instead of getting in right away, the king whispered something to his security team. The head guard looked surprised but nodded. The king turned and walked toward the crowd barriers. People gasped. This was not planned. Security guards rushed to follow him. The king stopped at the barriers and began to shake hands with people in the front row. People reached out to touch him. Some were crying with joy. "Thank you for coming," the king said over and over. "Thank you for your support during my illness." The queen watched for a moment, then joined her husband. Soon Prince Thomas and Princess Eleanor came too. The rest of the family followed their lead. Even the royal children were allowed to shake a few hands, though guards stayed very close to them. Martha, now wearing her medal, stood near the front. She had been escorted back outside after receiving her award. The king recognized her and stopped. "Enjoying your medal?" he asked with a smile. "Oh, Your Majesty," Martha said. "I shall treasure it always." For 20 minutes, the royal family moved along the barriers, meeting as many people as they could. It had never happened like this before. Usually, they went straight from the abbey to their cars. A young girl gave the queen a drawing she had made. It showed the king in his hospital bed with a crown on his head. The queen looked at it and smiled. "I shall make sure he keeps this," she promised the child. When they finally returned to their cars, the royal family was carrying armfuls of cards, flowers, and small gifts from the crowd. Their faces were flushed with happiness. It had been a perfect day, not just because of the grand ceremony, but because of these simple moments with ordinary people. The royal cars drove slowly away from Westminster Abbey. People lined the streets all the way back to the palace, waving and cheering. Inside the first car, the king and queen sat close together, looking out at the crowds. "They waited all day for just a glimpse of us," the queen said softly. The king nodded. "And we nearly didn't do the walkabout. I'm glad we did." In the cars behind them, the rest of the family followed. Prince James looked at the drawings and cards people had given him. His wife, Princess Amelia, was helping their children sort through their flowers. "Can I keep this one, Mummy?" asked their daughter, holding up a small bunch of daisies tied with a blue ribbon. "Of course you can, darling," Princess Amelia said. "We'll put them in water when we get home." The 5-year-old prince was falling asleep against his father's arm. It had been a long, exciting day for him. His toy soldier was gone now, left in the special box at the Abbey. But he didn't mind. He knew it was doing an important job. In another car, Princess Eleanor was reading a letter someone had pressed into her hand. It was from a woman who had been helped by one of her charities. The letter thanked her for changing the woman's life. Princess Eleanor, usually so serious, had tears in her eyes as she read it. When the cars reached the palace, more people were waiting outside the gates. The royal family waved as they drove through. Once inside the palace grounds, they could finally relax away from the public eye. The cars stopped at the main entrance. Staff members rushed out to open doors and help with all the flowers and gifts. Inside, the grand hall was ready for a family lunch. "Just family today," the king had said when planning the event. "No extra guests." The family walked through to the dining room. A long table was set with silver and crystal. Flowers matching the queen's dress filled vases down the center. But despite all the fancy things, the room felt warm and welcoming. The king sat at the head of the table. Instead of making a formal speech, he simply raised his glass. "To family," he said. "To family," everyone echoed. The youngest children were at a smaller table nearby. They had the same food as the adults, but with special cups that wouldn't spill. Royal nannies sat with them, helping the smallest ones. As they ate, the family talked about the day. They laughed about the little princess hugging her grandfather. They smiled remembering the toy soldier. Prince Thomas told funny stories about what he had seen from his spot in the Abbey. "Did you notice the Prime Minister nearly fell asleep during the long prayer?" he asked, making everyone laugh. Outside, the crowd slowly went home. They had seen what they came for. The royal family together again. The king healthy, a moment of history. Many would tell their children and grandchildren about this day. In homes across the country, families watched the news reports. The image of the king surrounded by his grandchildren was shown again and again. People saved newspapers and magazines with pictures of the event. Back at the palace, after lunch was over, the family moved to a large sitting room. The adults talked while the children played with toys kept there just for them. The king sat in his favorite chair, watching it all. The queen came to sit beside him. "A penny for your thoughts," she said. The king smiled. "I was thinking how lucky I am to have recovered, to have all of you, to have today." She took his hand. They had been through so much in the past year. Fear, pain, worry. But now they were on the other side. Today had been more than just a ceremony at Westminster Abbey. It had been a new beginning. Outside, the sun was starting to set. Its golden light filled the room where the royal family sat together. Tomorrow they would go back to their separate homes and duties. There would be more public events, more responsibilities. But they would always have today. The day they showed the world that before they were royals, they were simply a family, just like any other. And really, that was the most important thing of all.